North Carolina made headlines this week for enacting one of the country's most draconian anti-LGBT laws. Now, most of the outcry has been surrounding the effect of the legislation on the LGBT community. But the law is so severe that it states that the state's most prominent newspaper, the Charlotte Observer, has compared Governor Pat McCrory to the likes of George Wallace, Orville Faubus, and Ross Barnett, all Southern governors known for their support for segregation. But there are also concerns being raised about other aspects of the law that can have significant negative effects on wages and employment for everyone living in North Carolina. Now, yesterday I spoke with Reverend William Barber, president of the North Carolina NAACP and the author of The Third Reconstruction, Moral Mondays, Fusion Politics, and the Rise of a New Justice Movement about this very issue.
Last week, during Holy Week, when we ought to be focusing on love, justice, and mercy, our legislature, under the false guise of evangelical morality and conservatism, passed a bill that is laced with racism, discrimination, and classism. Let me tell you what your audience, what we don't know, what people don't know. This bill now makes it illegal for a city or county to require contractors to pay more than a minimum wage, and to require that people who contract with them also give certain kinds of benefits, i.e. sick leave and other things, to their workers. Secondly, this bill also makes it, nullifies the ability for a citizen based on age, based on sex, based on handicap, disability, race, or color, to bring a employment discrimination case in state court. And this law also takes away that ability. And so what it means is, in North Carolina now, you can no longer bring an employment discrimination case in state court. You have to go to federal court, which means it's harder for working poor people. They can't file in the courthouse in their county. This bill is a form of fear and Jim Crowism. It's really the negative side of fusion politics. They use the transgender, that's bad enough, and the LGBT community, but then they slipped in these attacks on the working poor, the disabled, women, people of color. It is just bad and unholy and immoral what they've done with this bill.
And just to re-rack that for folks, I want to put that graphic back up, if we could, please, to the producers. The three additional provisions, in addition to going after transgender people, ability to go to the public restroom, it prevents any local government from on its own enacting its own minimum wage for itself. So they cannot enact a minimum wage in their city, not for the whole state. And local governments cannot require contractors to have certain employment practices like a higher minimum wage or paid sick leave. So it prevents paid sick leave, and it prevents lawsuits. Individuals can no longer sue over employment or public accommodation discrimination. That's extraordinary, Reverend Barber. Yeah. Have you ever seen a law like that passed? Has anything like that ever been enacted in your state?
You have to go back to Jim Crow days. I mean, you have to, but it's an old tactic. It's the white Southern strategy, where you use fear, you use racism and homophobia in this case, but then underneath the laws, and then you cause people to vote against their own self-interest. Joy, even if you are discriminated based on religion, they've now nullified the ability for you to file a state discrimination case. Now, one of the things that concerns us, and this is where we're going to have to learn, in some of us in the so-called progressive community, the business community is in uproar about the attack on the LGBT transgender, and we are too, and you should be. But we should have been in uproar when this legislature passed the worst voter suppression law and the worst redistricting law, because that's what allowed these legislators to get in office in the first place, that are now passing these attacks on the LGBT community, on sick people, on voting rights, on the unemployed. We have to understand how this all connects. It is sinister, it is shrewd on their behalf, and we have to become very wise in the way in which we talk about this. So this is a bad bill for the LGBT transgender community. It's a racist bill. It's full of classism. It's discriminatory. We ought to be resisting it legally. We ought to be resisting it electorally, and we ought to be resisting it through civil disobedience. And by the way, your political civil disobedience. I think counties should go ahead and pass bills to raise their minimum wage and force the state to take them to court.
Yeah, indeed.
Because this is bad law. This is bad law, and it's bad, and we need to recognize it, because if it's happening here in North Carolina, the goal is to use this as a place, just like they did with the voter suppression, to see if they can spread it around the country.
One note, an update on some of the companies that have publicly opposed the new North Carolina law. They include Comcast and NBC Universal, our parent companies. And thank you to Reverend William Barber. We'll be keeping a close eye on this story in the coming weeks.